There is a joke that people made about Carol Wayne throughout her career. With that chest, this lady will never drown. It was said on television, in interview rooms, in the specific, casual way that Hollywood in the 1970s said things about women's bodies, openly, laughingly, as though the woman in question was a prop in the joke rather than a person hearing it. Carol Wayne heard it. She smiled. She played her part. She was the matinee lady, the blonde, the one with the squeaky voice and the devastating comic timing and the specific, practiced art of making every innocent sentence sound like an invitation. She appeared on The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson more than 100 times over 14 years. She was one of the most recognized faces on American late-night television. She made audiences laugh in 30 million living rooms. She was also, in the specific, invisible way that Hollywood processes its women when it has finished using them, completely alone by the time the joke stopped being funny. The show cut her in 1981. By 1984, she had filed for bankruptcy. Income listed, $0. By January 1985, she was in Mexico, at a resort in Manzanillo, with a man named Edward Durston. And on January 13, 1985, a fisherman named Abel de Dios found her body floating in 4 feet of water in a shallow bay. She was fully clothed. There were no cuts, no abrasions, no signs of a fall from the nearby rocks, no drugs or alcohol in her system. She had been afraid of water her entire life. The joke that people had made about her for years, with that chest, this lady will never drown, turned out to be wrong. Ironically, that remains the official cause of death. Accidental drowning. Case closed. Edward Durston, who had checked out of the resort 3 days earlier, leaving Wayne's luggage at the airport with a note that she would pick it up in the morning, was questioned. And then he was not questioned further. He went home to Los Angeles. He lived the rest of his life. And here is the detail that this video is going to examine from the first frame to the last. 16 years before Carol Wayne's body was found in that shallow bay, on October 4, 1969, a young woman named Diane Linklater fell from the 6th-floor window of her West Hollywood apartment. She was 20 years old. She was the daughter of Art Linklater, one of the most famous television personalities in America. The last person known to have seen Diane Linklater alive was Edward Durston. 2 women, 16 years apart. The same man present at both deaths, never charged in either. I am Mary. And today this channel is going to ask the question that nobody in Hollywood has ever asked loudly enough to get an answer. Not just what happened to Carol Wayne in that bay in Mexico, but what Hollywood was, and what it did to the women who served it, that made the joke about drowning so funny for so long. And what it means that the man present at 2 separate deaths, of 2 separate women in 2 separate decades, went home both times and nobody stopped him. Her name was Carol Wayne. She was the matinee lady. And nobody told her real story, until now. Before Mexico, before the bankruptcy and the Playboy pictorial and the cocaine and the career that vanished overnight, there was a girl in Chicago, a figure skater, a showgirl, a comedian, a woman who was genuinely, extraordinarily talented at something that Hollywood told her was worth less than her measurements. The career that built her and the decision that destroyed her is coming. The girl from Chicago. Carol Marie Wayne was born on September 6, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois. She and her younger sister, Nina, grew up in the specific, mid-century American way of 2 pretty girls in a city that rewarded prettiness. Aware from an early age that their looks were a form of currency, that the world responded to them differently than it responded to other children, and that this difference could be leveraged into something if they were smart about it. They were smart about it. As teenagers, Carol and Nina joined the Ice Capades, the traveling ice show that toured American cities and drew audiences who wanted spectacle and precision, and the particular, kinetic grace of 2 young women performing at speed on frozen surfaces. They dropped out of high school to do it. They embarked on a 42-city tour. It had its costs. One day, Carol was performing her usual tricks on the ice when she tripped, possibly on a penny or another item thrown on the ice, and fell. The fall resulted in a 5-inch scar running down her knee. A 5-inch scar. For a young woman whose career was built on her physical presentation, a 5-inch scar on her knee was not an abstract injury. It was a professional threat. It was the first indication. She was still a teenager when it happened, that the body that the industry had decided to value could be taken from her without warning, without appeal, without the industry particularly caring what happened to her afterward. She recovered. She kept performing. After the ice capades, the Wayne sisters became showgirls at the Foley's Burger at the Tropicana Resort and Casino in Las Vegas. Las Vegas in the early 1960s was a very specific world. The casinos were run by men whose relationship to legitimate business was complicated, and whose relationship to the women who performed in their showrooms was transactional in the specific, unashamed way of an era that had not yet developed a public vocabulary for describing what that transaction actually was. Carol Wayne performed. She smiled. She wore the costumes. She gave the performances that the room required. And she watched. She learned. She developed the specific, finely calibrated comic instinct of someone who has spent years in rooms full of powerful men and has figured out exactly how to make them laugh without giving them anything they have not paid for. Carol followed Nina to Hollywood in the mid-1960s, and the sisters began appearing in television shows of the era. Guest spots on I Spy, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, where she played a character named Bootsy Nightingale, a dim-witted starlet whose name alone tells you everything about what Hollywood in 1967 thought was funny about certain kinds of women. The Red Skelton Show, Love American Style. She was building a career in the specific, incremental way that character actors build careers, not through one enormous breakthrough, but through the accumulated weight of 100 smaller appearances, each one demonstrating to the next producer who watched that she could do what the role required. And then, in 1967, Johnny Carson called. Carson and his team hired her to work on The Tonight Show in the recurring Art Fern's Tea Time movie sketch, where she played the matinee lady, an innocent, va-va-voom woman who couldn't help making double entendres. The sketch was simple. Carson played Art Fern, a sleazy, lecherous late-night movie host, the kind of character that television of the era found endlessly amusing. And Carol Wayne played his companion, wide-eyed, high-voiced, apparently oblivious to the double meaning of everything she said, landing punchlines with the precision of someone who understood exactly what she was doing while performing the character of someone who did not. The audience loved it. They loved her. Wayne would go on to have more than 100 appearances on The Tonight Show over 14 years. Her chemistry with Carson was undeniable. And here is the honest thing that must be said about what Carol Wayne was doing in those 100 appearances. She was performing a character. The matinee lady, the blonde, the bimbo, the woman whose spectacular figure was the setup and whose apparent innocence was the punchline, was not Carol Wayne. It was a construction. A carefully maintained performance by a woman who understood comedy with the precision of a craftsman, and who had made the specific, calculated decision that this particular character was the one that would keep her employed. While Carol seemed to make no attempt to downplay her role as a dim-witted sex symbol. In reality, she made many attempts to hone her acting skills by working in the multitude of situation and sketch comedies popular throughout the 1970s. She was not the character. She was the actress playing the character. And for 14 years, through 3 marriages, a son, the specific pleasures and difficulties of a life lived inside the machinery of Hollywood. She played it with enough skill that 30 million people tuned in to watch her do it. She was good at what she did. What she did was not what Hollywood told people she was. In 1981, Johnny Carson made a decision that had nothing to do with Carol Wayne and everything to do with what happened to her afterward. He demanded NBC shorten The Tonight Show from 90 minutes to 60. NBC agreed. 30 minutes of content was cut. And the matinee lady sketches, the thing that had made Carol Wayne a household name for 14 years, were among the first things to go. What that decision produced, what the industry that had used her for 14 years offered her when it was done, and what she did next, is coming. When Hollywood finished with her. In 1981, Johnny Carson nearly walked off The Tonight Show. The reasons were complicated. the specific ongoing negotiation between a star and a network that has built its late-night franchise around him, the particular leverage that a man with Carson's ratings wielded, the question of what NBC would give him to stay. What NBC gave him was the thing he wanted most. They agreed to shorten The Tonight Show from 90 minutes to an hour. This gave Carson more free time. It also meant they had to cut a ton of material from the show, including much of Wayne's work as the matinee lady. It was a business decision. Carson made it. NBC agreed to it. And Carol Wayne, who had given 14 years and 100 appearances to the sketch that was now being cut, whose face was recognizable to every American who had watched late-night television since 1967, was not consulted. She was not consulted because she was not the point of the decision. She was part of the content that was being managed. She was, in the specific, transactional language of television production, a line item that was no longer cost-effective to maintain. Hard times followed for Wayne. The gig that had once made her a household name started to dry up very, very quickly. When The Tonight Show cut her, other work started to disappear too. This is the mechanism that this video wants to name clearly. The Tonight Show had not discovered Carol Wayne's talent. It had, in the specific, self-referential way that television fame works, certified it, made it legible to the rest of the industry. Her 100 appearances on The Tonight Show were the credential that told every other producer in Hollywood that she was worth hiring. When Carson's show cut the sketches, the credential evaporated. She was the same woman she had been the week before. The same comic timing. The same precision. The same finely calibrated ability to make an audience laugh that she had been developing since she was a teenage showgirl in Las Vegas. But the credential was gone. And in Hollywood, the credential is the career. Wayne wasn't least prepared for this. For the past decade, she had been working steadily, if not flashily, and she was a reliable actress. And then it happened almost completely overnight. She was in her late 30s. She had a teenage son. She had 3 marriages behind her, the first, brief. The second to photographer Barry Feinstein, with whom she had her son Alex. The third to television producer Burt Sugarman, which had ended in 1980, the same year The Tonight Show began winding down her appearances. 2 endings in the same year. The marriage, the show, and then the work stopped coming. Wayne's habits escalated from cigarettes into alcohol and cocaine, to the point where her friends pleaded with her to check herself into a rehab facility. One of those friends was Richard Pryor, who told her that not only would he pay for her treatment, but that once she was clean and sober, he would guarantee her a role in one of his upcoming movies. Richard Pryor offered to pay, offered a role afterward. She did not go. In 1984, the same year she had posed for Playboy magazine for much-needed money, Carol Wayne was forced to file for bankruptcy. In her petition to the courts, she declared $0 as income. $0. The woman who had been one of the most recognized faces on American television for 14 years declared $0 in income. Rumor had it that she occasionally served as an escort for wealthy businessmen in order to support herself. Now, here is the honest thing this video must say about what produced this outcome. Carol Wayne's addiction was real. Her choices were her own. She declined Richard Pryor's offer. She posed for Playboy rather than going to treatment. These were decisions she made. And they were decisions made by a woman who had spent her entire adult life being valued for one thing: a specific, performed version of herself that the industry had designed, and that the industry had then discarded when it became inconvenient, and who had been given no framework by that industry for what came next. The matinee lady was a character. Carol Wayne was a person. Hollywood had only ever been interested in one of them. And when the character was no longer useful, the person was left holding everything the character had accumulated. The fame, the recognition, the specific, disorienting experience of being someone whose face everyone knew and whose phone had stopped ringing, without any of the support structures that the industry had been providing while it still needed her. She was 42 years old. She was alone, and she was about to make the last decision of her life. In January 1985, perhaps bolstered by the positive reception of her final film Heartbreakers, which Roger Ebert had reviewed with genuine admiration, Carol Wayne left for Mexico. She was going, some accounts say, to dry out, to start 1985 differently than 1984 had ended. She went with a man named Edward Durston. Who Edward Durston was, what his connection to a death 16 years earlier actually means, and what the documented facts of January 10, 1985, the last night anyone saw Carol Wayne alive, actually say, is coming. The Man Named Durston. Before we get to Mexico, we need to talk about Edward Durston. Because Edward Durston is the detail that this video's audience already knows something about. The detail that the competitors' comment section lit up with. That the people who grew up watching Carol Wayne on The Tonight Show came back to the internet to discuss. And the detail that the official record of Carol Wayne's death has never fully addressed. On October 4, 1969, Diane Linklater, the 20-year-old daughter of television personality Art Linklater, fell from the 6th-floor window of her West Hollywood apartment at the Shoreham Towers. She was rushed to hospital. She was dead on arrival. Police questioned Edward Durston, who said that Linklater had phoned him the night before her death and was very upset. He went to her apartment at around 3 a.m. He said her behavior was extremely emotional, extremely despondent, and very irrational at times, in fact, most of the time. Durston said he attempted to grab her, but she jumped over the balcony. He was questioned. Authorities gave him a polygraph test. The results were never made public. He was never charged with any crime relating to Linklater's death. The polygraph results never made public. The case closed. Durston free to go. At the same time, Diane's father, Art Linklater, addressed reporters. He told them he knew what killed her, LSD. It wasn't until after the autopsy revealed that Diane had no drugs in her system that Art offered a revised version, that she experienced an acid flashback. No drugs in her system. Art Linklater told the world his daughter was on LSD. The autopsy said she was not. Art Linklater built an entire public anti-drug campaign using Diane's death as the centerpiece of his argument. The autopsy data, the actual, documented scientific finding that there were no drugs in Diane Linklater's system on the night she fell from a 6th-floor window, did not stop that campaign. And Edward Durston, the last person to see her alive, the man who said he tried to grab her but she jumped, went home. That was 1969. 16 years passed. And then, in January 1985, Carol Wayne went to Mexico with Edward Durston. They checked into the upscale Las Hadas resort in Manzanillo. Hotel employees later went on record saying Wayne and Durston spent their time in Mexico having fun, dancing and drinking. Whatever Carol had come to Mexico to do, whether it was to dry out, as some accounts suggest, or simply to vacation, what she was doing at the Las Hadas resort was not that. On January 10, 1985, the couple checked out late and missed their flight back to the United States. When they returned to the hotel after missing their flight, they were told there was no room available. They were directed to a less expensive hotel nearby. Carol was reportedly unhappy about the downgrade. An argument occurred between them. Carol stormed off to take a walk on the beach. She went for a walk on the beach, at night, alone. A woman who was terrified of water. When she didn't return to their new hotel room that night, Durston checked out. He left for the airport. He took Carol Wayne's luggage with him. He left it at the airport with a note saying she would come pick it up. And then he departed Mexico. Let that sequence land. His traveling companion did not come back to the hotel room after an argument. He did not call the police. He did not alert the hotel staff. He did not contact the American consulate. He collected her luggage. He went to the airport. He got on a plane. He left. 3 days later, fisherman Abel de Dios found Carol Wayne's body floating in the shallow bay waters. Mexican authorities wondered how Carol Wayne came to drown in waters 4 feet deep, fully clothed. There were no cuts or abrasions, so a fall from the nearby rocks was ruled out. The coroner stated that death occurred 3 to 4 days earlier. The body tested negative for drugs and alcohol. 4 feet of water, no cuts, no abrasions, no rocks, no drugs, no alcohol, a woman who was afraid of water. Fully clothed. The case was reopened and reinvestigated several times, including a reevaluation in 1990. With no signs of physical violence, the official ruling that it was an accident remained. Accident. Edward Durston died in 2010 of complications from pneumonia. He was never charged in connection with either death. He never gave a definitive public account of what happened on the beach at Manzanillo on the night of January 10, 1985. And the woman whose luggage he collected and left at an airport, whose body was found 3 days later in 4 feet of water that she was terrified of, is still officially listed as an accidental drowning. What Carol Wayne's death actually looked like, the documented questions that the Mexican investigation raised and never answered, the behavior of the one person who could have answered them, and the specific, documented fact that remains at the center of this story, is what this video is going to examine now. Along with the question that should have been asked loudly in 1985 and was not. What did Hollywood owe the woman it had made famous and then discarded? Is coming. The questions that were never answered. There are 5 facts about Carol Wayne's death that do not fit the official account of accidental drowning. This video is going to state them clearly, not as accusations, not as a verdict, as the documented record that the investigation produced and that the official ruling has never fully addressed. Fact 1. Carol Wayne could not swim and greatly feared the water. This was not a secret. People who knew her knew it. The ironic joke that had followed her throughout her career. With that chest, this lady will never drown was ironic precisely because her fear of water was known. A woman who is terrified of water does not go for a voluntary nighttime walk on a beach alone after an argument and end up floating in 4 feet of it fully clothed. Fact 2. There were no cuts or abrasions on her body. A fall from the nearby rocks was ruled out by investigators. There were no signs of physical violence. If she fell without hitting anything. If she was pushed without leaving marks. If she walked into the water voluntarily, she did so without the benefit of drugs or alcohol, with a clear system, in full possession of her faculties, knowing she could not swim and knowing she was afraid. None of these explanations is satisfying. Fact 3. Durston and Wayne had argued. The argument was about the hotel downgrade. Carol left to walk the beach. When she did not return, Durston did not call anyone. He did not call the police. He did not call the resort. He did not contact the American consulate. He did not stay to look for her. He did not report a missing person. He collected her luggage and went to the airport. The question that the 1990 reinvestigation and every subsequent examination of this case has asked, and never received a satisfying answer to is, why? Why take the luggage? If Durston genuinely believed Carol had simply walked off in anger and would show up in the morning, why take her things? If he knew she was planning to collect her luggage herself, as his note claimed, why not leave it in the room? The act of collecting her luggage suggests he knew she was not coming back. And if he knew she was not coming back, when did he know it? Fact 4. Edward Durston was also the last person to see Diane Linklater alive in 1969. She fell from a 6th-floor apartment window after he said he tried to grab her, but she jumped. He was questioned. The polygraph results were never made public. He was never charged. 2 women, 2 deaths. 2 investigations that reached the same conclusion, accidental or self-inflicted. No charges, 1 man present at both. The mathematical probability of 1 individual being the last person seen alive by 2 different women who died under unexplained circumstances. 16 years apart, in different states, in different circumstances, is not 0. Coincidences exist. Tragedies cluster around certain people for reasons that have nothing to do with those people. But the probability is low enough that the question deserves to be asked. It was not asked loudly enough in 1985. Fact 5. Nobody claimed Carol Wayne's body immediately. Ultimately, Pat McCormick, an actor and comedian who had known Carol, paid to bring her home for burial. The woman who had appeared on The Tonight Show more than 100 times. The woman whose face 30 million Americans had recognized for 14 years. The woman whose career had been built by an industry that had made significant money from her performances. Nobody from that industry claimed her body. A friend paid for her funeral. Now, here is the honest thing this video must say about what cannot be known. Edward Durston was never charged. No physical evidence connecting him to her death was ever presented to investigators. The official ruling, accidental drowning, stands. This video is not a court. It cannot reach a verdict. It will not claim to know what happened on the beach at Manzanillo on the night of January 10, 1985. What it can say, what the documented record supports saying, is that the questions raised by Carol Wayne's death were not answered with the thoroughness they deserved, and that the woman whose death raised those questions had been, for 14 years, one of the most recognizable women on American television, and that the industry that had made her recognizable did not bring its resources to bear on getting those questions answered. After the body was found, after the official ruling came back as accidental, after Edward Durston returned to Los Angeles and the case was technically closed, what happened to the story of Carol Wayne? Who remembered her? What the industry she had served for 14 years said about her passing, and what this video believes the honest accounting of her life actually looks like. Not the joke, not the character, not the matinee lady, but the woman. Is coming. What the industry said. After Carol Wayne's death, Johnny Carson kept the Art Fern character off the air for most of the following year. That is the recorded response of the man who had built a 14-year comedy partnership with her. He retired the character for a year, and then he hired someone else. Roger Ebert, reviewing her final film Heartbreakers in 1984, had written, "Her performance is so good, so heartbreaking, if you will, that it pulls the whole movie together." Roger Ebert, one of the most respected film critics in America, wrote that Carol Wayne's final performance pulled the entire film together. She received those reviews in 1984. She was filing for bankruptcy in 1984. The reviews and the bankruptcy existed simultaneously. The critical world telling her she was capable of extraordinary work, the industry that employed her offering her nothing that would allow her to do it. She was 42 years old with a Playboy pictorial, a bankruptcy filing, and a review from Roger Ebert. Only one of those things was being used to define her. Wayne had told Carson in a 1974 interview that she enjoyed gardening and growing bonsai trees, and in another interview, breeding Andalusian horses. She gardened. She grew bonsai trees. She bred horses. She was a person with specific, quiet interests that had nothing to do with the character she played on television. She was a mother. Her son Alex was 15 when she died. She was a woman who had turned a 5-inch scar on her knee into a showbiz career that lasted 20 years. She was a woman whose final film performance was described by one of America's foremost critics as the thing that held the whole movie together. And she was described, in the coverage of her death, primarily as the busty blonde from The Tonight Show. Now this video wants to be clear about something. The matinee lady sketches were genuinely funny. Carol Wayne's comic timing was genuinely extraordinary. The 100 appearances she made on The Tonight Show represented a body of work that was skillfully performed and legitimately beloved by the audience that watched it. The problem was not the character. The problem was the industry's insistence that the character was all she was, that the woman who played the dim-witted blonde with perfect precision was herself dim-witted, that the actress who understood every double entendre she delivered was somehow innocent of their meaning, that the person who had built a career from scratch, from Chicago to the Ice Capades, to Vegas to Hollywood to 100 Tonight Show appearances, was doing so by accident rather than by design. Hollywood made Carol Wayne into the joke. Hollywood made Carol Wayne into the joke. And when it was done with the joke, it did not ask what the woman needed. Let me tell you what this video has actually been about. It has been about the specific, documented cost of an industry that decides what a woman is worth, and then enforces that decision with the specific, efficient cruelty of a system that never had to think about the consequences because the consequences landed on someone else. Carol Wayne was worth something very specific to Hollywood. She was worth the matinee lady, the blonde, the squeaky voice, the body that the camera loved and that the audience responded to and that Carson built sketches around for 14 years. She was not worth whatever came after. When the show cut the sketches, the industry that had maintained her recognizability for 14 years did not also maintain her career. It moved on. Carson retired the character for a year and hired someone new. The other doors that had opened because of the Tonight Show quietly closed. The credential expired. And Carol Wayne, who had never been anything other than the sum of what the industry decided she was worth, was left with the full weight of that accounting. $0, bankruptcy at 42, a Playboy spread as a last resort, a man named Durston on a trip to Mexico, a walk on a beach she was afraid of, 4 feet of water, and questions that the official record has never fully answered. Here is what this video believes. It believes that Carol Wayne deserved the investigation that her death warranted. Not the investigation that was given to a woman whose career was over and whose body had been found in Mexico, but the investigation that would have been given to someone the industry still considered valuable. It believes that the presence of Edward Durston at 2 separate deaths in 2 separate decades deserved more than 2 closed cases and an unexplained polygraph result. It believes that the woman who made 30 million people laugh for 14 years, who gardened and grew bonsai trees and bred Andalusian horses, and received reviews from Roger Ebert, and raised a son, and survived 3 marriages and a 5-inch scar and a bankruptcy, deserved to be remembered as more than the punchline of the joke that turned out to be wrong. With that chest, this lady will never drown. She drowned, in 4 feet of water, afraid of the water, fully clothed. And nobody in the industry that made that joke answered the questions her death raised. 37 years later, those questions are still open. The case was officially closed. But this video is going to leave you with 2 things before you go. The first is a fact. Carol Wayne's death occurred exactly 1 year to the day after her last appearance on The Tonight Show. She had appeared on January 13, 1984. She was found dead on January 13, 1985. 1 year to the day. The second is a question. If the woman found floating in 4 feet of water, terrified of water, fully clothed, no drugs, no alcohol, no cuts, no abrasions, had still been on The Tonight Show when it happened. If she had still been the woman Carson called, if the credential had not expired, would the investigation have been different? Leave your answer below. I read every single one. If this video said something about Hollywood that the industry has spent 40 years not saying, please share it. Because the joke said she would never drown. This video was about everything that made that joke possible. And everything it cost her. This is Mary of Shadows. Thank you for being here. Black Heart.